Welcome to class 10. All right, so in this class, what we're going to be doing is applying some CSS to our page that we made last week. Basically, what CSS is stands for Cascade Style Sheets. What it means is it is another coding language that works in conjunction with the HTML that can either be a separate text document, it can be embedded inside of the same document, meaning you write it in the same sheet that you're writing everything else, or it can be written inside of each one of the HTML elements as you're writing your web page as well. Okay, and each one of them have their own advantages and disadvantages, and if you're more interested in it, if you're interested in learning any more of this further, I would highly suggest just taking the Web Design 1 class. Okay, but in the lump sum of it, the idea here, and I've already mentioned this before, is that the HTML is more or less the content, the structure, and CSS is the formatting and the design. It's going to allow us to add colors and change typefaces and placements and things like that. Now, what we've already created so far actually does have CSS. It's being imposed by the Bootstrap CSS. But we haven't created any ourselves. We just have allowed it to be whatever the default is that's being currently applied. And we haven't written any, you haven't even seen it really. I think I might have quickly shown it at one point, but it's not actually in there. All right. So the Bootstrap CSS is actually an external style sheet that's being applied to it. So it's merely linked to what our site currently is. We're actually going to create an internal embedded style section, and it just looks like this. You just write style, the opening tag of style, closing tag of style, and then you're going to write different CSS rules. So this only has two. It has one that's controlling the body and one that's controlling H1 elements, and this will go in the head. If you remember, we have the head, which is the top of the document, and then we have the body, which is all the actual content. This actually gets all thrown inside of the head. So it's one of those things that the user is not going to directly see, although it affects what they see. All right. So when you create your stuff, what you do is you have the general tag, and then you have your CSS rules. Okay, each one of these is a CSS rule. Okay, it is in its entirety it's a CSS rule. It has a selector and a declaration. So the selector means that it's going to, in this case, it's going to look for a P element, and then it's going to declare that the P element should have this applied to it. Okay, and you can have multiple things. So if you look up here, you can see this one has two different declarations. The declaration is made up of a property, and then you give that property a value. So in this case, we want to change the P property font family, and I'm going to make it Arial. Okay, and this could be any number of things. So the different selectors that are available are the ones you see here. I'm not going to go through all of them because for the most part, we're not going to touch any of this anyway. The one on this side. You could do universal, which just means you use an asterisk. If you use the coding, asterisks are just mean like everything. We don't generally use that too much. There's type selector, which means grab everything that's an H1 or everything that's a P or everything that's an ordered list, or you could do body or any number of those things, and then you can select them, and it will apply to all of those. So I want all of my paragraph text to be whatever. I would do a P, and then I could say I want it to be that font family. Okay. I want all the unordered list elements to be such and such. We use this one quite a bit. The other ones that we use are class and ID selectors. Let's say that I have multiple paragraphs and I want to change the color of my second paragraph, but not the first and third paragraph. If I just do paragraph, I just do a P selector, it will change the color of all of them. So what you would do is you give it a special name. And you can either use an ID, which is meant that you put it on only one element, or you give it a class, which means it can be applied to many elements. But either way, it'll have a name attached to it, and then you can select that name and then apply your CSS rules to it. Okay. Like I said, there are IDs and there are classes. Okay, so more or less what you do is you write it this way. So I have an H1 element, right? And then I have the content, so this would be like a title, and then I have the closing tag. Inside of the H1, I would write ID equals, not minus. Apparently, I'm good at writing. It should be an equals here. I'll fix that. Should be an equals, and then you'll give it a unique name. Okay. Now, the IDs should only be used once. So if I have another H1 or an H2 or whatever other element, P element, I can't put another ID called main heading. You actually can, and it actually, I think, still does work, but you're not supposed to. This is only meant for one item. Now, let's say we went further down and I wanted to have a class. It does the same thing. It's a unique name, but I can apply it to multiple objects. So you can see this P element has it, and this P element has this one called food description. Okay. So now if I had that as my selector and I wrote CSS somewhere else, anything with that class will have that applied to it. Okay. And you can also add multiple classes to one. So if you look, this has food description, and then you put a space, and then there's another class called subs. So I might have another CSS rule that is targeting subs and one that's targeting food description. And though this would get both of them, this will only get the one. So that's the idea. So if you want to grab a specific element, you either have to give it an ID or a class. Doesn't really matter either one, depending on the number that you might need to do. Generally speaking, if you're going to default to class. When you apply your CSS, it is imposing what we call a box model, which means that you have your content here. So let's just say it's text or a picture or whatever, a video, could be any number of things. And then it puts this box over it. Okay, so first with the content, you can adjust its height and its width. Then what you can do is you can adjust the space between the content itself and its outside border box. Okay, so let's say you have content and you want to have a background color around the content. If you want it to only go so far, you can choose how much padding it wants, and then that you want, and then that will basically put the space between this and the outside of that background color. Okay. Then after that, you have a border and outline. We never use outlines, so don't worry about that one. But border basically just allows you to put a line around it. There's different types of borders: solid, dashed, grooved. There's a number of them. Then after that is margin, and that is the space from the outside, basically, of the box of the content here to the next element. Okay, so if you push more margin, it'll push this object away from whatever's next to it. Left, right, top, bottom, wherever you want to do. Okay, so that's generally how it works. Is if you picture that there's a box around every single HTML element, right? So this is an HTML element, this is an HTML element, and you have a box that's imposed on each one of these, and you can adjust any one of those elements. Okay, there are a lot of CSS properties. Generally speaking, you can kind of break them down into these kind of categories. So you can adjust the positioning of them, of your HTML elements using CSS, the spacing, the border, the background color, or the background, which could be color or image, the text properties. So, the font color, typeface, alignment, there's a lot of stuff you can do with that. And then there's other ones like animation that you can apply, or interaction. So like, for instance, when we have a link and you want it, like when you hover over the link that it changes color, you can actually change that as well using CSS. There's a lot of them. Now, I can't really go through what all of them are. If you want, I mean, I could, but that's multiple classes, and it is in fact a class. So, but if you click on this link, this will bring you to W3 schools, and you can see a reference to all of them right here. There's a lot. So you might find that this is actually not that many in the grand scheme. If you've done coding, this is actually not a lot. But you can also go to CSS, and then if you go down here, it'll, they kind of do these little how-tos and how it works and all this other stuff. You can go right down the line. Okay. So if you're looking for something specifically, or you don't know how to write something, you can always just click in here. And if I go back to the CSS reference, and you're trying to I need to change my background color. I click on background color, and then you can see it'll tell you how to write it. And you can even click, and they'll show you little demos of what they look like. Okay, so there's lots of, that's a really, W3 Schools is a super valuable resource. Okay, so that is CSS. I know I kind of went through it. You probably don't remember any of it. You can come back and refer to this again, this little section here. This is obviously a very abbreviated, kind of quick overview. You're going to get more out of actually doing the video tutorial. So what you're going to do in the next one is, we're basically, like I had said before, we're going to carry on from where we were last, and we are going to apply our own CSS. That's what you're going to do. So basically, you're going to colorize it, apply images, change sizing, scaling, things like that. All right. There's 3 videos here. Each one is kind of like close to like 20 minutes. So sorry, it's kind of long. Just finish these videos. Feel free to explore if you're someone that's already done some web design, or you've taken web design. Feel free to kind of do more things than what's in here. You might want to still watch it just because it kind of covers the tool set of Dreamweaver a little bit more, which we don't cover in web design. And then when you're done, just post it, the typical stuff. If you run into any issues, which you very well may, just because this is a little bit different than a lot of the other things that you probably have done, where we're just like drawing pictures and, interacting with an interface. This is kind of codey. So, but just let me know and I will do my best to help you. But if you do have an issue, make sure you send me your file and then state what the issue is. And then I will respond with probably a video or something and the fix. All right. Good luck.